Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Courteney Cox, America's favorite calm in the chaos from Friends, walks onto The View expecting a friendly chat about her new series, but ends up in one of the show's most fiery debates of the year? The topic? Should the Electoral College be abolished and replaced with a national popular vote? The audience was excited to see Courteney, poised, elegant, that same dry wit that made her a household name. But once the conversation turned political, her cool demeanor clashed head-on with Joy Behar's unapologetic passion. At first, it was just spirited discussion. Courteney calmly explained why she believed the popular vote would make every voice count equally. Joy fired back that the system, though imperfect, protects smaller states from being ignored. Then it got personal. Courteney leaned in, saying, "Joy, fairness shouldn't depend on zip codes. It should depend on people." Joy shot back, "And mob rule isn't fairness either, Courteney. You don't burn down the foundation just because you don't like the house." The crowd gasped. Whoopi tried to diffuse it, but the exchange had already crossed into something deeper, something about trust, change, and who really holds power in America. By the time they cut to commercial, Joy's tone had sharpened, Courteney's composure was cracking, and the studio audience couldn't decide who they agreed with.
What happened next, you can't imagine. The atmosphere inside the View studio that morning buzzed with energy. The audience was in good spirits, holding up signs with quotes from Friends and cheering as Courteney Cox walked onto the stage. She looked effortlessly elegant. Black blazer, jeans, understated jewelry. That calm smile she'd perfected over decades of interviews never faltered. Even when Joy Behar joked, "Well, look who's finally back in politics after avoiding it for 20 years. Courteney laughed lightly. "Oh, Joy, I'm not back in politics, I'm just visiting," she said, settling into her seat beside Whoopi. "Visiting, huh?" Whoopi grinned. "Well, you picked a good day to visit. We're talking about the Electoral College." There was a playful murmur from the crowd. Courteney crossed one leg over the other, curious. "Oh boy," she said softly, smiling. Sonny Hostin jumped in. "So today's hot topic is whether the Electoral College should be abolished and replaced with a national popular vote." Joy's eyebrows lifted dramatically. "And I already know where this is going." Whoopi chuckled. "Let's just see." Joy turned toward Courteney with mock suspicion. "You're from Hollywood, right? I'm guessing you're in the popular vote camp?" Courteney gave a good-natured shrug. "I'm in the fairness camp, Joy. I just think every vote should matter equally no matter where someone lives." The audience applauded softly. Joy smirked, crossing her arms. "That's a nice slogan. But the system we have was designed to give smaller states a voice. If we just went by the popular vote, California and New York would pick every president." Courteney nodded thoughtfully. "I get that argument a lot. But the truth is, the current system already makes millions of people feel invisible. I grew up in Alabama, and honestly, people there often feel their votes don't count at all. Whether you're from New York or Nebraska, your voice should carry the same weight." The crowd broke into light applause again, a few cheers echoing from the back row. Joy wasn't impressed. "But Courteney, that's how the country was built, on balance. The founders didn't want mob rule." "Mob rule?" Courteney repeated, still composed. "I'd call it representation. If more people vote for one candidate nationwide, shouldn't that person win? Isn't that democracy?" The room stirred. Whoopi leaned back and grinning at the tension simmering between the two. "Well, we're off to a fun start," she said. Sonny tried to lighten the tone. "Courteney, you mentioned people in your hometown feeling ignored. Do you think changing the system would make them more engaged in politics?" Courteney nodded immediately. "Absolutely. When people believe their voice counts, they show up. I think so many Americans stay home on Election Day because deep down, they feel their vote won't make a difference. A national popular vote could change that." Joy leaned in, resting her chin on her hand. "But you don't think that could backfire? What if the popular vote swings heavily urban? What happens to all those smaller communities that depend on representation to survive?" Courteney looked directly at her, steady. "Then it's up to politicians to earn their votes, not rely on geography to protect their power." The audience erupted. Cheers, claps, even a few whistles. Whoopi raised her eyebrows, smiling. Oh, she came to play. Joy forced a smile, but her tone cooled. So you're saying the founders got it wrong? Courtney didn't flinch. I'm saying the world has changed. The founders built a system for a country of 4 million people. We're a nation of over 300 million now. Don't you think democracy should grow too? The crowd buzzed again, half cheering, half murmuring. Joy chuckled under her breath, shaking her head. See, that's what happens when actors start talking politics. It sounds lovely, but the world isn't that simple. Whoopi interjected, sensing the shift. Let's not make it personal, Joy. I think what Courtney's saying is we evolve, right? Exactly, Courtney replied, her tone even but firm. Change doesn't erase history, it honors progress. The applause that followed was louder this time. Joy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Well, Courtney, I hope you're ready because I have a few things to say about this progress of yours. Courtney smiled, tilting her head slightly. I wouldn't expect anything less. The studio lights gleamed off the set's glossy desk as the camera zoomed out. You could feel it. The polite energy that had opened the show was gone. The air was tighter now, charged with that unmistakable electricity that meant the real debate was just beginning. And Joy Behar? She was just getting warmed up.
By the time they came back from the first commercial break, the energy on set had shifted completely. The smiles were thinner now, the laughter more restrained. The audience could feel it. Courteney Cox and Joy Behar were no longer politely disagreeing. They were gearing up for a real confrontation. Whoopi started cautiously. All right, before we pick up where we left off, let's keep it respectful, okay? I know people feel strongly about this one. Joy smirked. Oh, don't worry, Whoopi. I'm just having a healthy debate with a national treasure over why she wants to rewrite the Constitution. The audience laughed nervously. Courtney smiled, but her tone had lost its softness. I'm not rewriting anything, Joy. I'm just questioning whether a system designed in the 1700s still makes sense in 2025. That line drew a ripple of applause. Joy tilted her head. See, that's the problem, Courtney. Everybody thinks if something's old, it's broken. But the Electoral College keeps balance. It protects small states, farmers, working families, people without Hollywood megaphones. Courtney leaned forward slightly. Joy, you can throw in Hollywood all you want, but this isn't about me. It's about voters who feel ignored because their state always leans one way. Their voices don't matter in national elections. Because that's how our system works, Joy. It's called federalism. States have rights. You take that away, you turn America into one big popularity contest. Courtney didn't blink. Isn't that what democracy is? The people choosing? The crowd erupted, half clapping, half murmuring. Whoopi's eyes darted between them. Ladies, let's... But neither was listening. Joy leaned in, voice sharp. You can't just erase the state's voices because you think people in L.A. and New York know best. The Electoral College keeps power from concentrating in cities. Courtney's voice dropped slightly, calm but cutting. Power's already concentrated, Joy. That's the whole problem. A few swing states decide every election while millions of Americans elsewhere are spectators. That's not balance, that's exclusion. The audience gasped. Joy pressed her palms to the table. You think you're talking for the people, Courtney? You've been living in a mansion for 30 years. A mix of laughter and gasps swept through the studio. Courtney paused, her expression hardening just enough to show the hit landed. Then she nodded slowly. You're right, Joy. I am lucky. I've had a good life, but that doesn't mean I stopped caring about fairness. If anything, I feel more responsible to speak up because I can. That answer earned her a burst of applause so loud that even Whoopi smiled and said, Okay, that was classy. Joy didn't back down. You can be classy all you want, but the truth is, most Americans don't care about systems. They care about surviving. And when we start tearing down institutions, that's when democracy crumbles. Courtney shot back quickly, her tone still calm but her eyes flashing. Or maybe democracy crumbles when we stop believing it can be improved. The crowd roared. Sonny Hostin, sensing an opportunity, tried to redirect. Courtney, you've said you grew up in Alabama. If we went by the popular vote, wouldn't rural states like yours lose influence? Courtney nodded slightly. Maybe, but influence shouldn't come from geography, it should come from participation. Every vote should weigh the same, whether it's cast in Manhattan or Mobile. People deserve to feel seen, not used. Joy shook her head, almost laughing. But that's not how this country was built. The system keeps every region important. If we go by the popular vote, candidates will only campaign in big cities. You'll never see them step foot in Iowa again. Courtney's expression softened slightly. Or maybe if every vote counted, they'd have to go to Iowa, to everywhere, because every single person would finally matter. There was a pause. The audience burst into applause again, louder this time. A few people even stood up. Joy exhaled, visibly irritated. You know, Courtney, you can dress this up however you want, but abolishing the Electoral College is just another way of saying you don't trust America to think for itself. Courtney's reply came without hesitation. No, Joy, I'm saying I trust Americans too much to let a system keep ignoring them. The studio erupted again. Gasps, cheers, applause. Whoopi looked toward the producer's booth, signaling for another break, but before she could say anything, Joy leaned forward with one last jab. You talk about democracy like it's a movie ending happily ever after. But this isn't Friends, Courtney. Politics isn't scripted. Courtney didn't blink. Neither is fairness. The lights dimmed as Whoopi raised her hand, her voice cutting through the noise. We're going to break before this turns into something wild. But everyone could see the heat had only just begun. Both women stared across the table, unblinking, as the audience buzzed with electricity. And as the cameras faded to black, one thing was clear. The debate wasn't over. It was about to explode.
The air inside the View studio had shifted. What started as a spirited debate about abolishing the Electoral College now felt like something heavier, something personal. Courteney Cox leaned forward, her tone soft but cutting, and you could sense she was done playing the Hollywood diplomat. You know what, Joy, Courtney said, her voice even. I think this conversation shows exactly why people are so frustrated with politics. It's not about systems, it's about control. The Electoral College lets the handful of states decide for everyone else. That's not democracy. That's a show. Joy Behar crossed her arms, a small smirk forming. Control? You mean the kind that lets Los Angeles and New York pick every president? I love you, Courtney, but that sounds like entitlement disguised as fairness. A murmur rippled through the audience. Courtney didn't blink. Entitlement? Joy, millions of people's votes don't even count equally. My brother in Tennessee, his vote matters more than mine. How's that fair? We're supposed to be one country, not a math problem. Whoopi tried to step in, her voice calm. Ladies, let's remember, this isn't about who's right. It's about how we can improve representation. But Joy wasn't done. Representation comes in many forms, Whoopi. The Electoral College protects smaller states. Without it, the entire election becomes a coastal popularity contest. Middle America vanishes. Is that what you want, Courtney? Courtney's jaw tightened. I want every American to feel like their voice matters. You talk about small states, Joy, but what about the millions in swing states who are ignored unless their vote is politically useful? We've built a system that rewards strategy over sincerity. Sonny Hostin leaned forward. But Courtney, you're assuming fairness is only about numbers. What about diversity of geography and culture? Abolishing the Electoral College doesn't guarantee equality. It guarantees majority rule. Courtney nodded slightly. The majority rule is democracy. Isn't that the whole point? Joy chuckled, shaking her head. No, sweetie, that's mob rule. Our founders knew that. That's why they created checks and balances. You can't just burn down the system because you don't like the results of a few elections. That line struck a nerve. Courtney leaned in, her tone sharper now. It's not about losing elections, Joy. It's about learning from them. The system worked for centuries when people didn't have access to real data or social media. But times change. We can't cling to a broken model out of nostalgia. The tension was palpable. Joy's voice rose. Broken model?
Tell that to the farmers, the veterans, the towns that still believe their voice matters because of that system. You want to take that away and give it all to the big cities. Very Hollywood of you." The audience gasped. Courtney blinked, slowly. "Hollywood of me? That's beneath you, Joy. I'm speaking as an American, not as an actress. You're the one turning this into a stereotype." The studio went still. Whoopi sighed. "Okay, let's take a breath here." But Courtney wasn't done. "It's easy to mock people for wanting change, but it's harder to admit when the system's outdated. You can defend the status quo all you want, but someday it'll defend itself against you." Joy smiled thinly. "Is that a threat or a prediction?" "A reality check," Courtney said quietly. "You can't keep silencing the majority just to protect the illusion of balance." The back and forth was no longer just about policy, it was about principle. Ana Navarro tried to step in, her tone measured. "Maybe there's a middle ground. Reform it. Don't abolish it. Modernize it without erasing it." But neither woman was ready to cool off. Joy leaned toward Courtney, eyes narrowing slightly. "You know, it's funny. Every time someone doesn't like the rules, they call them unfair. Maybe instead of tearing down the Constitution, people should learn how it works." Courtney exhaled sharply. "I know how it works, Joy. I also know who it doesn't work for. My nephew voted for the first time and said it felt pointless because his state's outcome was already decided. That's not democracy. That's disillusionment." That landed hard. Even Joy paused for a second. Then she said quietly, "You think feelings should rewrite the Constitution?" "No," Courtney said, her voice low but steady. "I think fairness should." For a moment, the table fell silent. The cameras caught Joy's face, still proud, still defiant, but softening ever so slightly. Whoopi, sensing the tension finally settling, looked between them. "We're hitting deep stuff here. Maybe this isn't just about votes, it's about trust, whether people still trust the system to treat them equally." Courtney nodded. "Exactly. It's not about red states or blue states. It's about believing your voice counts." Joy leaned back, arms uncrossed. "Well, maybe that's something we can agree on. People have stopped trusting the system, but abolishing it isn't the only way to fix that." The crowd applauded. It wasn't resolution, but it was recognition. And just as the tension started to cool, Courtney added one last quiet line. "Maybe the only reason we're afraid to change it is because deep down, we know who it's really protecting." The words hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. Because what happened next, no one on that stage could have imagined.
The quiet that followed Courtney's last words wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that sits heavy in a room, the kind that means something just broke. Joy Behar sat still for a few seconds, her red glasses glinting under the lights. Then she let out a small, almost nervous laugh.
"You know, Courtney, you sound like one of those conspiracy theorists who think the entire country is rigged against them. Who exactly do you think this system is protecting?" Courtney turned to her, calm but unwavering. "People in power, Joy. The ones who write the rules, bend them, and then pretend it's all about fairness. If the Electoral College were really about protecting balance, it wouldn't keep tipping toward whoever manipulates the map better." The audience stirred, half clapping, half murmuring. Joy straightened in her seat. "You act like this is a game, Courtney, but the system has kept the country stable for over 2 centuries. You don't throw away something that works just because it doesn't give you the results you want." That was the spark. Courtney's eyes narrowed slightly. "Stable? Joy, it's divided us more than ever. You talk about preserving tradition, but what about preserving faith and democracy? If people stop believing their vote matters, the system collapses from the inside. That's not stability, it's denial." Joy's voice rose an octave. "No, what's denial is thinking that mob rule will magically fix anything. You can't hand the presidency to whoever racks up the most Instagram followers and call that democracy." That line drew laughs from a few in the crowd, but Courtney didn't smile. "That's the problem, Joy. You're mocking a real issue because it's easier than facing it. The world isn't the same as it was in 1787. People are informed, connected, and they want equality, not privilege disguised as protection. Whoopi leaned in. All right, hold up, both of you. This isn't about mocking anyone. It's about reimagining a system without tearing down trust. But Joy ignored her, still focused on Courtney. So what's your plan then? Just burn it all down? Every time a system doesn't fit your idea of perfect, you scrap it? Courtney exhaled. No, Joy, you evolve it. You adapt. The Constitution was written to serve the people, not the other way around. We act like it's untouchable, but even the founders expected it to grow with us. Anna nodded softly. She's right about that part, Joy. The founders did allow for change. Amendments, reforms, progress. Joy waved her hand dismissively. Sure, but the founders didn't want direct democracy for a reason. They feared mob mentality. And frankly, I still do. Courtney's tone turned firm with a flash of disbelief. You're calling the American people a mob? That's what this comes down to, isn't it? You don't trust them? The studio went dead silent. Joy looked taken aback. Don't twist my words. I'm not, Courtney replied. You said it yourself. You're afraid of the people having too much power. But that's the point of democracy. Trusting the people even when it's uncomfortable. Joy tried to counter. Trusting people doesn't mean turning elections into popularity contests. But Courtney didn't back down. Joy, you talk about balance, but balance shouldn't come at the cost of fairness. You're protecting an idea that's leaving half the country unheard. Whoopi looked uneasy, sensing this was about to boil over. All right, let's bring this back to the question. Should the Electoral College be abolished? But Courtney's focus stayed locked on Joy. The truth is, Joy, you don't want to lose control of the conversation. You talk about protecting small states, but deep down, it's about protecting power. Power of the few over the many. That landed like a punch. Joy's face tightened, her voice suddenly lower, measured. You think you know me that well, Courtney? You think you can sit here and psychoanalyze my motives because you've been in a few political fundraisers? Courtney shook her head slowly. No, I think I can see when someone is afraid of change. A hush blanketed the set. Whoopi's hand went to her earpiece as producers scrambled backstage. The tension was thick enough to slice. Joy finally spoke again, her voice quieter but shaking. You don't understand the consequences of what you're asking for. Once you open that door, you can't close it. Every election, every vote, it becomes chaos. And chaos is how democracies die. Courtney stared at her for a long second before replying. Or maybe chaos is what happens when people realize they've been silenced for too long. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some booing. Cameras zoomed in on both women, each refusing to look away. Whoopi finally called for a break, her voice cutting through the noise. We'll be right back. But even as the lights dimmed and the applause sign flashed, neither Joy nor Courtney moved. They stayed locked in that unspoken standoff. Two women from different worlds, both convinced the other was protecting the wrong America. Because this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a line drawn in the sand. And when the cameras came back on, something happened that no one, not even the producers, could have seen coming.
When the View returned from the break, the tension hadn't gone anywhere. The lights felt dimmer, the air heavier. Courtney sat with her hands folded in her lap, still composed but visibly affected. Joy was silent for a rare moment, staring down at her notes before finally looking up at the audience. Whoopi leaned forward, her tone gentle. All right, that got intense. The crowd laughed softly, breaking the ice. But this is what happens when people care deeply. Let's take a breath. Joy exhaled and nodded. I'll say this, she began, her voice lower than before. Courtney, I may not agree with you, but I respect that you came here and said what you believe without sugarcoating it. That's rare these days. Courtney offered a small smile. And I respect you too, Joy. You've been fighting for your beliefs for decades. I just think sometimes the fight needs to make room for change. Joy gave a faint grin. You're not wrong about that. Change is inevitable, it just scares me sometimes. That simple admission shifted the whole energy. The audience softened.
The applause was gentle this time, not explosive, like everyone in the room collectively exhaled. Sonny leaned in. Maybe that's what this country needs more of? Conversations where we don't try to win, but actually try to understand each other. Courtney nodded. Exactly, because democracy isn't about silencing the people who disagree with you. It's about trusting that, deep down, we all want the same thing, a country that listens. For a brief second, even Joy smiled at that. The segment wrapped with Whoopi's trademark calm. Well, I think we just gave civics class a ratings boost, she joked, and the room erupted in laughter. As the show went off air, Joy and Courtney stood, exchanging a handshake that lingered just long enough to feel sincere. The tension had cracked, but what replaced it was something closer to understanding, or maybe just mutual exhaustion after a storm. Within hours, clips of the exchange flooded social media. Hashtags like Cox versus Behar and Trust the People trended nationwide. Some called Courtney a hero for modern democracy, while others accused her of Hollywood idealism. Joy's fans defended her as the voice of reason, while others argued she finally met someone who matched her wit and grace under pressure. One tweet summed it up best. It wasn't about politics. It was about fear, hope, and what we still believe America can be. And maybe that's why people couldn't stop watching. Because on that day, two women on a talk show didn't just debate the Electoral College. They reminded a divided country that even in disagreement, respect still matters. If you enjoyed this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more celebrity showdowns, emotional debates, and unforgettable talk show clashes that keep America talking.